Witam Was, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Shrine of Remembrance. And on behalf of the trustees, the governors, the life governors, it is my pleasure and privilege to be your host this morning. And that we're so lucky with the weather. I particularly acknowledge Lenka, Consul General, who will be your master or mistress of ceremonies this morning. But I want to particularly highlight a gentleman sitting in the front row. Lenka, I'm probably taking your thunder, but to be able to recognise a World War II veteran here this morning it's an honour, sir, to have you with us. We here at the Shrine, we embrace the diversity of our community and we acknowledge the Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we sit. And we honour Australian Defence Force personnel for their service and sacrifice. And we pay our respects to their elders, past and present. May I introduce Lenka as your Master of Ceremonies. Lenka.
Thank you, Governor. Let me welcome Her Excellency, the Ambassador of the Czech Republic, Mrs. Jana Tyr. And I would love to, before I present my remarks on the history of the Czechoslovak Ex-Servicemen's League, I would too like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. On this beautiful day, we gather here to commemorate the Czech and Slovak men and women who served in the Australian and Allied forces over the last 11 decades. Shortly after the establishment of Australian Federation, as the World War I broke, the first Czechs and Slovaks volunteered in the Australian Imperial Service and later in the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, also known as ANZACs. There was a handful of them. Their first trip was to Gallipoli in 1915 and then to the Western Front. Joining Australian Army was not easy for our first migrants. Coming from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Britain's enemy, the Czechoslovaks too were treated as enemies, and many were sent to internal and labor camps and later to join the Yugoslav battalion to help the Serbian army fight on the Thessaloniki front. Many of them succumbed to various diseases, particularly malaria. Others experienced real hardship as prisoners of war, and it was their polite and soldier-like behavior that gained them popularity and respect. In 1918, 8 Australian Czechs and Slovaks put their hand up to go back to Europe to help establish the first Czechoslovak army in France. They first came to Australia as travelers, migrants, students or refugees escaping military service in the Austrian-Hungarian army. They briefly got to experience the newly established Czechoslovakia in October 1918 before returning to Australia, their home of choice. Migration of Czechoslovaks between the wars was subject to strict quotas, with only 610 Czechoslovaks living in Australia by 1933, most of them are men. After the Munich Agreement in 1938, Australia saw a wave of refugees, mostly from the German-speaking border regions of Czechoslovakia, known as the Sudetenland. This was a predetermined destination for many Jews. When Australia joined the war in 1939, recruitment of volunteers was necessary to cover the shortage of professional soldiers. Czechoslovak consulates, led by the Melbourne Honorary Consul Edgar Henry Peacock, engaged in recruitment of Australian Czechoslovaks for the Czechoslovak army, but many preferred joining the Australian forces. Regardless, our brave countrymen felt passionate about their duty to defeat Nazism, which was quickly spreading throughout the world, and many sacrificed their life for the cause. Czechoslovak servicemen fought in various battlefields of the Mediterranean and the Middle East. In 1941, some took part in the longest siege in the British military history, the Siege of Tobruk, and managed to hold off against an overwhelming number of German and Italian forces for 241 days. The brave defenders quickly became known as the Rats of Tobruk. In May this year, we were able to pay a special tribute to these servicemen in an exhibition called Czechs and Slovaks in Brody helmets, followed by screening of the Czech film Tobruk. I would like to mention a number of Czechoslovak women who joined Women's Auxiliary Air and Territorial Forces and Women's Royal Naval and Medical Services. They were engaged in driving, cooking, and various administrative jobs. Some operated radars and lighting equipment. Czech and Slovak men and women served in various war conflicts during the 20th century, be it in Czechoslovak Air Force squadrons, in tank battalions under Russian command on the Eastern Front, in infantry of the French Foreign Legion in the Middle East, as RAF pilots in Spitfire squadrons who took part in the Battle of Britain, RAF air crew in Bomber Command, as members of the 1st Czechoslovak Independent Armoured Brigade Group in Normandy, members of the British Special Ops who served in clandestine missions behind enemy lines, partisans of the Slovak National Uprising, and members of the Czech Underground. There were Czechs and Slovaks in Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan, and other war theaters around the world who fought to uphold values like freedom, democracy, human and religious rights, and peace. It takes some bravery to sacrifice one's life to save others, to leave the comfort of one's home to experience harsh conditions, misery, and trauma. The consequences are long-lasting. The ripple effect felt within the families. Today, we pay our respects to all the Australian Czech and Slovak men and women who served or serve alongside Australian and Allied forces and foreign legions around the world. Their bravery is admired, their sacrifice appreciated. It is my great pleasure to welcome here today the Czech ex-serviceman Jiří Schwenger. Just 3 months short of the 100th birthday. Jiří, also known as George, left Czechoslovakia in haste at the age of just 15, alone, just as the World War II was about to break. Being Jewish, his mother feared for his life, so she took him out of school and took him to the airport and sent him to England. Mum arranged for George to take English lessons from the embassy porter before he left, so he spoke some English as well as German, and therefore worked as a houseboy for a family and later in a bookshop. But above all, he wanted to be a pilot. His eyesight unfortunately prevented him from being a pilot, but aged just 17, he was already serving in the British Air Force, having acquired training in intelligence radio operations. George was engaged in a special operation in an old castle Scarborough. He had an important job of searching for and reporting with high precision on the location of German aircraft so it can be eliminated. In his headset, he could hear the sounds of the battlefield. A truly frightening experience. Today, we pay our tribute to his bravery and sacrifices of many Czechs and Slovaks servicemen and thank them for their leadership in the fight for freedom we know today, lest we forget. And now I would like to invite Her Excellency, the Ambassador of the Czech Republic, Jana Tyr, to lay a wreath on behalf of the Czech community, and Mr. Ivan Kovarčík, the President of Australian Slovak Association of Victoria, to lay flowers on behalf of the Slovak community. Thank you. I now invite any other guests or family members who would like to pay their respects and lay their wreaths and floral attributes. And also anyone who has a single puppy in their hand, I would like to invite you to lay your puppy in the urn. Thank you.
No ceremony, everybody. Just come forward as you are and lay your puppy in the urn. Come forward, please. There's always going to be somebody who starts it off. Well done. Is that? Oh, no, I'm not recycling. May that continue.
Thank you very much. I would like to now invite Governor Colson to recite the ode.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you can stand, I ask you to do so. They shall grow not old, as we who are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them, lest we forget. Please remain standing for the last post. forget. If you can, please remain standing for the national anthem of Czech, the national anthem, the Slovak national anthem, and the Australian national anthem. Thank you.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is good by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts, all beauty rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains that let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Please be seated.
Thank you, Governor, and the Shrine of Remembrance for this wonderful opportunity to honor our servicemen in this special ceremony. Thank you all for your attendance and your tributes. I would like to invite you to the Western Gallery in the Visitor Center for a morning tea. This concludes the official service. Thank you.